Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has implored world leaders gathered at the UN General Assembly to stand united against Russia's invasion of his country. He said Moscow must be pushed back so the world can turn to solving pressing global challenges. He also urged world leaders to attend a peace summit to help stop the war and future ones.
There was applause in the auditorium as he took his place at the United Nations General Assembly lectern. It was the first time Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy had appeared in person at the annual summit since Russia invaded his country in 2022. In a passionate speech, Zelenskyy underscored the dangers of allowing Russia's invasion to go unchallenged.
Other countries' power plants into real dirty bombs. While Russia is pushing the world to the final war, Ukraine is doing everything to ensure that after Russian aggression, no one in the world will dare to attack any nation.
Zelenskyy accused Russia of weaponizing energy and food supply as a way of putting pressure on the world. He also used the word genocide to refer to the abduction of tens of thousands of Ukrainian children.
We have to stop it. We must act united to defeat the aggressor and focus all our capabilities and energy on addressing these challenges.
Zelenskyy took to the world stage at a sensitive time in his country's campaign to maintain the momentum of international support for its fight. A year and a half after Moscow started the war, Ukrainian forces are 3 months into a counter-offensive that has not gone as fast or as well as initially hoped. Shortly before Zelenskyy made his speech, Ukrainian officials said 9 people had been killed in several Russian attacks. When Joe Biden took the stand in New York, he asked world leaders for more support for Ukraine.
We have to stand up to this naked aggression today and deter other would-be aggressors tomorrow. That's why the United States, together with our allies and partners around the world, will continue to stand with the brave people of Ukraine as they defend their sovereignty and territorial integrity and their freedom.
Echoing Biden's words, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz was unambiguous.
Let no one forget, Russia is responsible for this war, and Russia's president is the one who can put an end to the war at any time with one single order.
Zelenskyy is hoping to garner broad support for a peace summit this autumn built on a 10-point plan outlined by Kiev 1 year ago.
Rafael Loss is a defence analyst at the European Council on Foreign Relations. I asked him for more on Zelensky's peace plan.
The plan flows from the recognition that even if Ukraine were to liberate all the Russian-occupied territories that the international community recognizes are Ukrainian, that might not mean that Russia ceases its war of aggression, that hybrid measures, that attacks against Ukraine's political independence might continue as long as Russia does not recognize Ukraine as an independent sovereign nation. Okay. And this peace plan outlines a couple of points that are supposed to underline Ukraine's independence and sovereignty as a member of the international community, as Volodymyr Zelenskyy outlined in front of the General Assembly yesterday.
Rafael, that sounds like an admission that Ukraine can't end this war on the battlefield.
Rarely wars end on the battlefield. What happens on the battlefield, though, determines the political coordinates under which a peace agreement can be achieved. And therefore, it continues to be important for Ukraine to liberate all of its internationally recognized territory, but Ukraine recognizes that peace would only follow from Russia's admission that Ukraine is a sovereign and independent nation.
Now, Ukraine's president is expected to join the UN Security Council meeting later today, where he could meet Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Zelensky's called for Russia to be stripped of its seat. Is that likely?
That is unlikely, although there's some controversy among international legal experts as to whether it would be possible or not. I think the legal hurdles and the political hurdles, because the majority of countries in the United Nations would have to agree to such a measure, are so high that such a result is indeed unlikely.
Now, when it comes to support from other nations for Ukraine and its defence, how much of a problem is the slow progress in Ukraine's counteroffensive?
I think if you look at the discourses in Germany and Europe and the United States, in the West that is continuing to support Ukraine, things get a bit more tricky for leaders. They continue to assure their publics that they seek to keep this war limited, that this is a war of Russia against Ukraine and not against their own societies. But it is more difficult than it maybe was last year when Ukraine had unexpected successes in Kherson and Kharkiv, liberating in a surprising assault Russian-occupied territories, that this current counteroffensive is going maybe more slowly, less effectively than many had hoped for and planned for, including Ukraine's own government, makes this political messaging a bit more difficult. But it also shows that that Ukraine's past successes from last year set the bar maybe a bit too high in what to expect in this war against, after all, a nuclear-armed major power that is Russia.
Rafael Loos from the European Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you very much. Ukraine's security service has rejected a report by the New York Times suggesting a deadly explosion in the eastern Ukrainian city of Konstantinivka earlier in September was caused by a Ukrainian missile. The newspaper says that evidence collected by its journalists strongly suggested the blast was the result of an errant Ukrainian air defense missile. The reporters came to the conclusion after studying missile fragments, satellite images, witness accounts and social media posts. Ukraine blames Russia for the attack, which killed at least 16 people. Let's bring in Matthias Berlinger, our correspondent in Kyiv. Matthias, tell us more about how the New York Times came to this conclusion.
The New York Times has first and foremost used video material, and in this video material filmed from camera northwest, that means pointing towards the blast site, but positioned in the direction of Ukrainian-controlled territory. It shows a rocket flying over two cars, a reflection of a rocket or missile on these cars that seems to indicate that it came from the direction where the camera is, and then it has identified a site in that direction where that day most likely missiles were fired. It has also looked at ballistic evidence, the patterns of the shrapnel that point to a different type of missile, a Buk missile, and not a S-300 missile, as the Ukrainians say. However, there is this evidence is contested. People, netizens and journalists have used mirrors to reproduce this situation with these two reflections, and they have shown that a rocket coming from the opposite side in a steep angle, that means from the Russian side, would lead to the same reflection pattern that has to do with the angles of reflection. There's also evidence that people might have looked towards this site that the New York Times it identified in that direction upon hearing sound. That's also something that is not as conclusive. First of all, these ballistic missiles, they fall quite steeply. It's unclear whether you would be able to identify a direction of the sound or not. And then that makes the rest of the evidence, the ballistic patterns, a little bit more shaky. So this evidence might not be as conclusive as the New York Times claims. However, their version is also not ruled out. It would still be possible that it happened exactly that way.
So how's their report gone down in Kyiv?
The Ukrainian officials and services have refuted that. They have, however, not presented their own evidence of their version that it was an S-300 fired from southeast. That means the Russian-controlled territories. So It's a bit unclear. Netizens have reacted quite angrily at this, having accused the New York Times of spreading Russian disinformation. Of course, this version that the rocket came from, where these reflections seemed to point, was something that was ventilated on Russian propaganda channels for some time, but not only on Russian propaganda channels. The community is divided here, the OS-INT community, and they have also personally attacked some of the authors of this report, accusing them of having spread pro-Russian narratives before. So a very emotional debate here in Ukraine around this investigation of the New York Times.
Matthias Böllinger in Kyiv, thank you very much.